Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Truth About Psychiatry. This is episode number 10. I think in the last video I accidentally said number 10 when it was number 9, but this is the 10th video. And today, the topic is, or the title of this video is Mocking Psychiatry. And there's really so much to mock. And I just think it'd be good, now that we've laid out a little bit of the history, some of the key figures in psychiatry and anti-psychiatry. We've addressed the topics of autism, schizophrenia. We've spoken about bipolar disorder and ADHD. We've talked about Peter Breggin and Robert Whitaker. We've talked about Bonnie Burstow and a lot about Thomas Szasz, although there's a lot more to say about him. In fact, I will just mention some of the books we have yet to discuss with Thomas Szasz include Coercion as Cure, The Theology of Medicine, The Myth of Psychotherapy, The Therapeutic State, Anti-Freud, Liberation by Oppression, Psychiatric Slavery, Pharmacracy, The Manufacture of Madness, and Psychiatric Justice, and Szasz Under Fire. And the book Szasz Under Fire is the book with criticisms of Thomas Szasz, and then Thomas Szasz's replies to those criticisms. So we'll hopefully get into some of those books a little bit more in the future. I just wanted to share a couple of quotes with you on this theme of mocking psychiatry. St. Thomas More said, "The devil, the proud spirit, cannot endure to be mocked." Martin Luther said, "The best way to drive out the devil, if he will not yield to texts of Scripture, is to jeer and flout at him, for he cannot bear scorn." C.S. Lewis, quote, "Above all else, the devil cannot stand to be mocked." And these are all good reasons for mocking psychiatry. And there's, as we'll see, there's already many humorous depictions of psychiatry in pop culture. Humorous or mocking depictions. Some are more accurate than others, and I'd like to kind of review a few of them just to help you see more clearly which portrayals of psychiatry are consistent with the true nature of psychiatry. And I also wanted to do this particular video on mocking psychiatry, just have a little more lighthearted, because this is a controversial, serious topic, and some of these issues are obviously very touchy for many people, and for good reason. And I just like to clarify again that if, as I've mentioned before, that my reason for doing this is I want to help people who have been enslaved by psychiatry, who have been tortured, been abused by psychiatry. But I've also mentioned how psychiatry operates under the pretext of helping, and under the pretext of healing or offering remedies, or the helping professions. What C.S. Lewis called the omnipotent moral busybodies, and Weaver, a guy that I quoted as mentioning that the harm that is done through the good intentions of helping. I wanted to clarify how my way of helping, or this way of helping, is different. What I mean by helping is I believe that human beings are created in the image of God, that they have divine nature and destiny and infinite potential for good. I believe that human beings are gifted with agency and the capacity to grow in intelligence and wisdom. I believe that human beings are dignified people. They're beings with moral agency, and this is the the opposite of what psychiatry, how psychiatry approaches a human being. So, as with this belief, I also believe that people can help themselves, and I believe that minding your own business is part of justice, and also that people, when given the right tools, the right knowledge, the right understanding, human beings have amazing capacity to improve and to make better choices. They can be resilient. So this way of helping is the opposite of the psychiatric way of helping. Psychiatry serves as a sort of um, overbearing, demeaning, uh, like medical, wicked stepmother. That's kind of how a way of characterizing psychiatry. Um, just basically convincing people that they're mentally ill, that they're incapable. They'll have to take drugs all their life. Um, they'll have to be in a mental hospital. That basically you can't help it because you're ADHD or you're bipolar or you're depressed or you're this. And this is not to say that whatever symptoms or problems that you deal with aren't real, because there are real problems and they are real. Life is hard and it was meant to be that way. At the same time, however, I would say that the lie that psychiatry teaches people is that you can't do it. You're you're weak. Your brain is broken. You're incompetent. You're incapable. You have a chemical imbalance. As we've talked about, all that is just plain nonsense. So what I'm trying to offer is the opposite of psychiatry. When psychiatry says basically your brain is broken, you have a chemical imbalance, you're mentally ill, ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenic, whatever you've been labeled with, a personality disorder. I mean, there's 800 pages in that Bible of psychiatry. Um, or you're autistic, your kid's not going to be able to do anything because he's autistic, and blah, 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 blah. It's just false. So, whatever problems you have, whatever weaknesses you have, it doesn't matter. You are created in the image of God, and you are great, and you can get through, you can overcome hard things. And one of the ways to overcome is to grow in wisdom and knowledge to understand the way things work. And that's my way of facing what psychiatry is. I want to give accurate information about psychiatry, what the real history has been, what psychiatry really is, so that people can make their own choices. So that's enough for a disclaimer about helping in the psychiatric way versus really helping or allowing people to help themselves, paving a path for people to help themselves. So before we get into some more mocking of psychiatry, which psychiatry deserves in abundance, I just wanted to pull up the Wikipedia page on psychiatry because as I was kind of researching for this video today, I came across the Wikipedia page on psychiatry and I just thought, this is bound to be full of false information, and lo and behold, I was right. It's very misleading, not surprising, but let me go through some of it and just give you a little more accurate understanding of what psychiatry is than what is commonly supposed or what is on the internet, what is on the Wikipedia page. So according to Wikipedia, in this entry on psychiatry, and it's April 25th, 2020, psychiatry is the medical specialty devoted to the diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of mental disorders. Okay, as we have seen, psychiatry has nothing to do with medicine, even though psychiatrists go to medical school. There's nothing medical about it. It's pseudo-medicine, if anything. Devoted to the diagnosis, no, there's no diagnoses going on. A diagnosis is what a doctor does when he observes a real biological phenomenon, a real aberration in the body, um, in the organs, and whatever problem it could be. It's something that's measurable. A diagnosis, of cancer or diabetes or what have you, is an actual thing. Whereas what psychiatrists do, they don't diagnose, they label, um, and these so-called mental diseases are actually, as we talked about, they're not real diseases. They're invented. They're created. So it's not a diagnosis. It's a label. And by the way, my sunburn today is from playing so much tennis, which was great. I enjoy it. So diagnosis, prevention. I mean, how can you prevent a non-existent thing? It's nonsense. Like there's since there's no such thing as mental illness, like the effort to prevent this non-existent thing, I mean, it just goes hand in hand with all of the other um, all of the other problems of psychiatry and treatment. Okay, treatment is a commonly used phrase in psychiatry, but it's a euphemism for torture, for forcible involuntary incarceration, for other abuses. There's all sorts of records of abuses of psychiatry, drugging, electro torture, um, all sorts of different kinds of torture. So whenever you hear the word treatment, just think torture because that's what it is, and treatment of mental disorders. As we've talked about, the concept of a mental disorder is very problematic. It's like mental illness. It's a myth, as Thomas Szasz has pointed out. So already in the first line of this Wikipedia article on psychiatry, there's a lot to correct. These include various maladaptions related to mood, behavior, cognition, and perceptions. Okay, nonsense. Maladaptions. Since when is a maladaption a disease? I mean, it seems like the most absurd. How do they turn this into something that people believe is medicine? I mean, in some ways it's clever, but in some ways it's just foolish. Initial psychiatric assessment of a person typically begins with a case history and mental status examination. Mental status examination? I mean, how, this borders, I mean, this is why Szasz compared psychiatry to astrology or alchemy. I mean, there's nothing scientific about it. Physical examinations and psychological tests may be conducted. No, there's no physical. I mean, even if a doctor conducts a physical examination, that's a completely separate thing from what psychiatry does or claims to do, because as we've seen, there is no blood test, there's no brain scan. Although they're gonna, neuroimaging is all the hype nowadays, and neuroscience, and coming up with all these brain scans that are supposed to indicate where the mysterious mental illness is in the brain. But once again, if a brain scan were to actually show some problem in the brain, immediately that person with that problem would be transferred from psychiatry to a neuro a neurologist, or depending on what kind of problem. Once a problem is identified, that's an actual biological marker that moves it away from the field of psychiatry into actual medicine. So, but be very careful with neuroimaging, because there have been a lot of. I've even seen some of these signs on the highway that show, like, here's a brain and here's an addicted brain, and it kind of has different colors like blue and red and purple and so forth. It's like, I mean, give me a break. So even if those are images of actual human brains that were done with neuroimaging, a lot of times the neuroimaging that's done has been conducted on people whose brains have been or are currently being damaged by psychotropic drugs. So you take a so-called schizophrenic who's loaded with neuroleptics, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and of course you're going to have an image of a brain that's damaged in some way because the drugs are damaging the poor person's brain. So be very careful when you look at those neuroimages, those neurophysiological techniques. Quote, mental disorders are often diagnosed in accordance with clinical concepts listed in diagnostic manuals, such as the International Classification of Diseases, ICD. So that's a more international form of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, edited and used by the World Health Organization, WHO. Well, that's great. I mean, as we've clearly seen from this Wuhan virus pandemic, there's very little reason to trust anything that comes out of the World Health Organization. And the widely used Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, published by the American Psychiatric Association. The fifth edition of the DSM-5, was published in 2013, which reorganized the larger categories of various diseases. No, they're not diseases, they're fictitious diseases and invented diseases, and expanded upon the previous edition to include information insights that are consistent with current research. Oh, what nonsense. There's not any this isn't research. These guys they're not discovering, they're not diagnosing or doing more research to discover new brain diseases. They're getting together with a bunch of psychiatrists and with the backing of the pharmaceutical industry, with the help, financial support of, big pharma, and they're expanding these diagnostic or these fake diagnostic categories in order to encompass pretty much any human being that in the world. So that's a little bit of correction there on the Wikipedia page. Some things. There's a lot more in here that I could go through. There is a little section on controversy and criticism, and obviously that has to do with here we have Cooper and Thomas Szasz and anti-psychiatry, but once again they attempt to connect anti-psychiatry to Scientology. The Scientologists have created a museum in, I think, Hollywood or Los Angeles somewhere, where it actually has some accurate depictions of the torture that psychiatry has conducted over the years. But since that is, affiliated with Scientology, it's dismissed as being, not real or not true. But I would just say, even if something is produced by a Scientologist, doesn't automatically make it inaccurate. People would be skeptical because they're skeptical, rightly so, of Scientology. I am too. But if they're actually right about something, which in this case they're actually right about psychiatry, then people ought to pay attention to that. But it's just characteristic of the psychiatric apologists that they'll use any strategy whatsoever to try to discredit the sound reasoning of the anti-psychiatrists, particularly Thomas Szasz and others after him, including psychiatric survivors. Whenever you see the attempt to associate anti-psychiatry with Scientology, just realize that's a tactic of psychiatric apologists to try to dismiss the legitimate criticisms of psychiatry. So that was probably more than I thought I was going to share about the Wikipedia page, but let's go ahead and continue mocking psychiatry. So I found a bunch of cartoons that are good on making fun of psychiatry. I'll start with those and then work into some, some different depictions of psychiatry in film and TV, in the media, and so forth. So, um, yeah. So here, a couple cartoons. I have a blog post called Psych Tunes early on in my Psychiatric Survivors blog, and just a few of them I'll just share. There's one that has an elephant sitting on a couch, and the psychiatrist, the elephant lying down on the couch, and the psychiatrist next to him, and the elephant is saying to the psychiatrist, sometimes even if I stand in the middle of the room, no one acknowledges me. So these are not necessarily funny in the way that when I read them, but if you see them, they're actually pretty good. Uh, there's one has a chicken on the psychiatrist's couch, and the psychiatrist is writing in his notebook, why do you think you crossed the road? Lots of cartoons mocking psychiatry and how they drug people for money. Here's one: a man on the psychiatrist's couch. Could we up the dosage? I still have feelings. Um, Here's one: a lady on the psychiatrist's couch. All I want to do is lie around all day. This isn't helping. Uh, I think it's a Gary Larson one. After that there's a there's a guy. This is kind of funny. Gary Larson's funny. He just has a great sense of humor. But this guy is laying down on the psychiatrist's couch, and you see the psychiatrist with his notepad, and he's writing just plain nuts. So then there's one of psychiatrist that's kind of coming up onto the couch where the guy is laying down, and the guy's kind of looking at him askance, saying, "Well, right now I'm feeling a little uncomfortable." Lots more about drugs and how psychiatry is, drugging people for money, conflicts of interest. I like this one. There's a little picture of a bottle with, it says FDA approved drug, and then there's a warning label, and the warning label says, warning, contains FDA approved drug. I thought that was good. So here's a good one. There's a secretary's opening the doctor's office door and says, "Dr. Gordon, there's a drug dealer here to see you." So I thought that was good. So there's a bunch more in there. You can look it up. Some cartoons, and there's many more cartoons mocking psychiatry. Did you know that psychiatry is for stooges? Yeah, that's because there's actually a couple of episodes on the Three Stooges. Maybe some of you are old enough to remember the Three Stooges, Larry, Moe, and Curly. There's an episode called From Nurse to Worse, and in this episode, Curly feigns madness by pretending to be a dog in order to obtain insurance money. Then Larry and Moe help Curly escape from a psychiatrist who attempts to lobotomize him. So this is great. I just think it's great that already back in the day the Three Stooges were mocking psychiatrists. I actually found a bunch of articles in psychiatric journals and journals of medicine that are about the portrayal of psychiatry in pop culture and the media. And in these articles, written by psychiatrists most likely, the authors are saying, please be careful when you see what's in how psychiatry is depicted on television or Hollywood, because it's, oftentimes psychiatrists are being mocked, and so that's not necessarily accurate. and all of these reasons, trying to defend psychiatry. I find it rather amusing. Um, but I did discover it's interesting that I'm sure you've heard the term a shrink. What why how did psychiatrists come to be known as shrinks? I was doing a little research on this. I'm still not exactly sure, but some of the things that I found, and this was already back in the 50s, so there's been, um, I wish the stigma were bigger or more clear, and not just a stigma. I would hope through these videos and through my blog and other people who are writing, Bregan and Whitaker and Burstow and Saz and others, that the truth about psychiatry will become so clear that not only will it liberate the captives of psychiatry, the victims of psychiatry, but it'll also liberate the psychiatrists themselves. So that, in the Wikipedia page, unfortunately, it looks like there's been an uptick in people enrolling in psychiatry and medical school out of interest because of developments of new supposed treatments of psychotropic drugs and so forth, and the expansion of all these supposed mental illnesses. So this could be helpful to anyone. I met someone not too long ago who was thinking about going into psychiatry, and I just warned her, like, just look, please don't do that. If you're interested in medicine, by all means, study medicine, but find some legitimate field, and don't go into psychiatry. And for those who are already in psychiatry, this is nothing against you personally. It's just I would hope that you will find real, meaningful work instead of what psychiatry is. So there's this episode of Curly feigning madness, Larry and Moe helping Curly escape from the psychiatrist who's attempting to lobotomize him. There's another episode called Three Sappy People, and in this episode, Larry, Moe, and Curly pretend to be psychiatrists in order to treat a wealthy man's capricious wife. And then I write, as these episodes clearly demonstrate, psychiatry is for stooges. So check those out you can find them on my blog, and the post is Psychiatry is for Stooges. I'll post a link to that. Another funny depiction of psychiatry, funny though sad, is a friend showed me this episode of The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show. It's got a really hilarious premise, and there's some funny episodes. But in this particular episode, and I don't know if I have the name written down of which episode it is, but you might be able to find it by the name of the drug that they depict in this. Maybe you've already seen it. The drug is called Diziplen, Dyziplen. So 400 milligrams of Diziplen. Diziplen. So this drug treats hyperactivity, ADHD, and Kanye West spectrum disorder. And in this episode, if you haven't seen it, one of the children, a mother is having trouble, looking after her child, and the psychiatrist prescribes this drug, Diziplen, which basically puts the poor kid sedates him to the point of being a docile and so docile that he wants to go shopping with his mother instead of playing on the playground or whatever it is he does. But I just thought that was good. The drug is called Diziplen, and it treats hyperactivity, ADHD, and Kanye West spectrum disorder. Which, by the way, Kanye West, there's some interesting things we could say about him in connection. One of our previous videos, we talked about celebrities in psychiatry. I probably should have mentioned Kanye West because I think he's been also victimized by psychiatry and all the false ideas about so-called bipolar disorder, and a lot of these, a lot of these celebrities become, after they're diagnosed or labeled with these disorders, they become a sort of spokesperson. I mean, Carrie Fisher did this before she died. They become a spokesperson for psychiatry and for the pharmaceutical companies, which is really sad considering what the drugs are actually, what the label and the drugs are actually doing to them. So there's discipline. I found a really interesting debate or an interview slash debate. So the debate is between Thomas Szasz and Albert Ellis in 1977. They debated over the concept of so-called mental illness and many other topics. And I think the full video is available somewhere. I have a post in my blog called Psychiatrists Are Bastards. So if you look up Psychiatrists Are Bastards on my blog, you can find some clips of that debate. In this debate, I'm going to share a little soundbite from it. I say there are a few points over which I might quibble with Szasz, but on the whole, he makes mincemeat of Ellis. This is not to gloat about winning arguments, rather it is to celebrate the courage, good humor, wit, and wisdom of a man who did much to defend common sense, liberty, and responsibility, namely Thomas Szasz. And he was so bold in declaring the truth about psychiatry, which is one reason why he has been given the silent treatment or ignored or also mocked and ridiculed and labeled and dismissed as a Scientologist and all of this other stuff because he was speaking the truth. So here's a little sound clip, and let's see if I can get it close here from this debate. And this is Thomas Szasz responding to Albert Ellis in 1977. This is what he has to say about psychiatrists.
You said you called the psychiatrist irrational, misguided, some other things. I don't know why you don't want to call them by the nice, plain English word, bastards. Evil, money-grabbing. That was not an irrational term. It made money and power, gave them money and power. It had obvious strategic value. It had the same value as calling blacks chaps or calling Jews vermin. That's to me obvious. It was not an indifferent mistake. And again,
so there we have Thomas Szasz saying it like it is. Psychiatrists are bastards, evil, money-grubbing. You can see the whole video. The whole debate is really great. So I like that. Szasz mocking psychiatry. Szasz as a psychiatrist, by the way, mocking psychiatry. And so I looked up a list of fictional psychiatrists. There's a lot in pop culture, in movies and TV. There's obviously a lot in literature as well. I think I'd like to do a whole episode on psychiatry and literature because there's a lot we could talk about there, including the work of Anton Chekhov in he wrote Ward Number 6. There's all sorts of other depictions of psychiatry in literature, but in pop culture and film, a couple that I came across that I think are useful. Often psychiatrists are portrayed as really evil. Like in Batman, you have the Arkham Asylum, and you have just different depictions of psychiatry in Batman, which the articles, the written by psychiatrists are trying to defend and say, hey, this isn't fair. Why are you calling you shouldn't be calling psychiatry. You shouldn't be depicting psychiatrists in this way when they're, it's part of the helping profession. But as we see from the history of psychiatry, it's actually quite accurate. Which isn't to say that all psychiatrists are bastards, evil, money grubbing, although some of them probably are. I like Robert Whitaker's analogy. There are good apples in a rotten barrel. So there's probably a lot of good people who are in the field. But I'm also not, I won't hesitate to say that there are, on occasion, there are, just as depicted in Batman, there are psychiatrists that are like the psychiatrist depicted in Batman, or another one is in Terminator. I didn't remember this. It's been so long since I've seen Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, but Sarah Connor escapes from a mental hospital, and the way that psychiatrists are depicted there, I think, is good because it shows like just what it is. That like it's a prison system with jailers and wardens and barbaric treatment of so-called patients. So even worse, I really don't like this movie, but Silence of the Lambs, apparently there was Hannibal Lecter was a forensic psychiatrist. So, just like in Batman, there's some really evil psychiatrists, which is, unfortunately, like, that's a reality too. So in connection with that, there's actually a website called psychsearch.net, 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 and it claims to be the world's largest collection of records on psychiatrists. You can go to any country, any geographical location, any state. You can look up psychiatrists and all of their criminal records. You can file a complaint. So whoever started this, there's even a section on cartoons. Whoever started this was pretty smart because, now you have a whole database filled with all the criminal psychiatrists. So that's a little bit from a little bit darker side of the history of psychiatry and of psychiatry in the media. On a little lighter note, I don't remember these episodes, but I found, if you guys ever watch The Simpsons, there's episodes with Dr. Marvin Monroe, and I mean now that I've seen it, I remember the character, but there was a whole episode on Dr. Marvin Monroe's family therapy center, and the whole family goes, the whole family is together, and they're all, Dr. Marvin Monroe is a psychiatrist, and he asks them to each draw a picture of, what their discontent is all about, and everyone in the family draws a picture of Homer, except for Homer. He's distracted and he's drawing a picture of an airplane or something. So at the end of the episode, the Dr. Marvin Monroe, he gets out these foam bats for each member of the Simpsons family to hit each other with. So it's a humorous depiction of psychiatry. And there's another episode where Dr. Marvin Monroe has, maybe you've seen it, he has the Simpsons family all together in a shock therapy room, and they all have access to buttons to shock each member of the family. And, Dr. Marvin Monroe lets them go, and they're shocking each other so much that it's actually drawing power from the whole city. And Dr. Marvin Monroe, just so fed up, he ends up kicking out the family and kicking out the Simpsons and giving them back all their money. So I thought it was a funny depiction of psychiatry in the media on The Simpsons. Um, Recently, I watched the movie. Have you guys seen Will Smith and Ava Mendez the in Hitch? So I'd forgotten, but there's a scene where Hitch is on a double date and talking to, I guess it's uh, his girlfriend's boss and his wife. So Hitch, Will Smith is talking to the wife. He says, "So Louise, are you in the newspaper? Are you in the newspaper business also?" She says, "No, I'm a psychiatrist." And he says, "Oh well, that's the last thing I'm going to say tonight." So I'd forgotten about that little scene, but I think it's funny that uh, kind of the how how psychiatry is depicted in the media um, or in movies. So obviously, there's also movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I think is very good, very accurate. Um, there's also, um, let's see, what is the movie called about John Nash? A Beautiful Mind. So I think it's pretty good, although it gets some things wrong about psychiatry, but it actually it depicts some of the brutal nature of psychiatry, so that's good. But there are other movies that get it completely wrong. For example, Silver Linings Playbook gets it completely wrong. Uh, um, there's Girl Interrupted, I think, gets it wrong. Um, because some of these movies are actually trying to depict psychiatry in a way that is misleading, that it goes along with the psychiatric narrative that it's a healing profession and this is medicine and these are real, like, mental illness is a real thing, and instead of these invented fictitious diseases. So just gotta. Oh, another one that I really don't like. I mean, it's a funny movie, but it just gets psychiatry all wrong. What about Bob? It's just. I mean, it is mocking psychiatrists, so that's good, but it's still doing so in a way that lends too much legitimacy to the pseudoscience that psychiatry actually is. One show that my family really likes is called Monk, and I've been thinking about Monk a lot lately because of the pandemic. There's you know he was Monk was obsessed with germs and cleaning everything, so I think it's funny to think of Monk in a situation like this pandemic. Um, so Monk is a funny show, and there's some interesting kind of depictions of psychiatry in Monk, um, and I'm okay with it. Although I feel like it doesn't. I mean, there's not enough. Have to watch all the episodes to really know, but um, it's not quite like The Simpsons or others that are, or the Three Stooges that are deliberately mocking psychiatry because it is such a silly, um, well, harmful but silly pseudo profession. So that's a little bit of mocking psychiatry. I mean, I could go on and on about this because there's so much to mock in psychiatry. Um, Not just the fake diseases, the fake doctors, fake patients, fake diseases, um, with fake medicine, fake hospitals. I mean, the whole it's been described as a house of cards. So, I think eventually it'll crumble and collapse. But whatever we can do to tell the truth about psychiatry, that's what I'm trying to do here in these videos. So let's see. I think that's about it for today. Um, I'm sure there's many other depictions. Oh, if you know of any other depictions of psychiatry in the media, in Hollywood, film, TV, internet, anything like that, especially mocking or making fun of psychiatry or psychiatrists, feel free to share at the end of this video, and I would appreciate that. So thanks for listening to this or watching this episode 10 of The Truth About Psychiatry, Mocking Psychiatry, and we'll see you soon.